And we are live. Welcome back, everybody. Dip Catcher Radio back again. Another exciting stream we've got. Um, just today, we rolled out a pretty important utility for HEX. Now that HEX is in a dual chain universe, and it is called HEX Combinator. It is an index token that is backed by an equal amount of eHEX and pHEX. The ticker symbol is CHEX, so say like CHEX. And each CHEX is backed by an equal amount of eHEX or pHEX, regardless of which chain it is minted on. If you're on Ethereum, you can mint one CHEX with one native hex and then one hex bridged from PulseChain. And likewise, if you're connected to PulseChain, you can mint one CHEX on PulseChain with one native hex, which is your copy that you got when the fork happened, and one hex bridged from Ethereum. And so the value of CHEX, because it is both mintable and redeemable at that same 1-to-1 rate, it in theory should track the combined value of eHEX and pHEX. So this is pretty exciting. I've been ever since the launch. That's really been the number that I've looked at in HEX is that combined value, and I even made that a little chart to easily track the combined value, and that kind of gave me the idea to just implement some of the things that we've already done in terms of token escrows and minting and redeeming on deposits and like treasury owned assets to just deploy this simple index for HEX. So pretty exciting. Launched it just a couple hours ago, and so far, why don't we pull up the chart? 1 sec. Go to hexcombinator.com. There it is. Let's share the screen. One moment. All right, so this is the website, hexcombinator.com, trustless cross-chain hex index. So let's just read this out and we'll talk about some of this stuff. HEX Combinator is a dual chain index token backed by an equal number of eHEX and pHEX. Anyone can mint one CHEX by depositing one pHEX and one eHEX to the HEX Combinator trustless smart contract. At any time, one pHEX and one eHEX can be redeemed per CHEX token burnt through the HEX Combinator smart contract. HEX Combinator was simultaneously deployed on both PulseChain and Ethereum. Minting one CHEX on PulseChain requires one native pHEX and one bridged eHEX. Minting one CX on Ethereum requires one native eHEX and one bridged pHEX. CX or CHEX, let's call it CHEX. CHEX is designed to track the combined value of eHEX and pHEX through a bi-directional dual chain minting and redemption function. If CHEX on one chain becomes worth more than CHEX on the other chain, it creates an arbitrage opportunity to buy the lower priced one, redeem the HEX and the bridged HEX, bridge them over, and remint them on the other side to close that spread. Due to this arbitrage cycle that keeps the price between CHEX on both chains relatively constant, providing liquidity between the two could be a high yield, low impermanent loss liquidity strategy. The goal is to have a token that roughly tracks the combined value of HEX on Ethereum and HEX on PulseChain. This is a solution for new onboards to the HEX ecosystem to gain exposure to both eHEX and pHEX with one simple swap, as if they were here before the fork. Additionally, this is part of a larger liquidity bonding and indexing solution for the upcoming pool party HEX stake pools. So that's just a quick explainer of what CHEX is. Let's see if anyone has any questions. We just see Dip Catcher and Gold Key on fire. Sup, exciting new contract. Look forward to hearing the details. And Paul says, "What up, Tonto? What up, Paul?" So no questions yet. Why don't we go through and we'll show you how it works. So you just go to the site, you just click connect wallet. So now we're in here connected. Then you can click mint checks. So right now there's been 177,000 checks minted on Ethereum and 451,000 checks minted on PulseChain. So that means that there's about almost 1 million checks, or almost 1 million hex combined on PulseChain, because each checks is backed by one eHEX, one pHEX, and just over 300,000 on Ethereum. So let's just go through this. So you can mint checks here. To mint checks, deposit an equal amount of native hex and bridged hex. So native hex, here's a little explainer. If you're connected to Ethereum, native hex is the original hex token, which you can find at OX2B591E, and bridged hex is hex from PulseChain, and that's the native hex from on PulseChain but bridged over to Ethereum. If you're connected to PulseChain, native hex is the hex copy you received at the fork, and bridged hex is the hex from Ethereum. So this just shows your current balances. So in my little test wallet here, I have 1,000 checks, 99 native hex, and 110 hex from Ethereum. So why don't we show you how to mint? So first, what you do is you choose how much you're going to do. Let's just mint 10 checks. And so first, you need to approve the transactions. So here I'm approving the hex. When it pops up, click use default and it populates with the amount that is requested from the site. You don't need to approve more. You can choose how much you want to approve, but just choose. Generally it's better to only grant the exact amount that you're about to use. So now it's approving hex. We can kick off the approving hex from Ethereum transaction as well. And if you look up here, I'm connected to PulseChain. So that's the one that I'm on. So now we wait. So when you do your minting, you deposit the eHEX and the pHEX, and then also you have to send to the contract something that's called this arbitrage throttle. So the arbitrage throttle, let's pull that up. So an arbitrage throttle is set by the Combinator DAO, which we'll talk about more in a little bit, to introduce a small fixed cost to minting checks paid in ETH or Pulse, depending on which network you're on. It was initialized to be close to $10 at the current ETH and Pulse chain prices. The arbitrage throttle only applies to minting, not redeeming. And the arbitrage throttle is designed so that users below some value threshold can get a better deal by buying CHEX on the market instead of minting, which helps foster an active market. The arbitrage throttle is also a type of size bonus, where the more checks you mint, the smaller percent of the total transaction that the arbitrage throttle is. The arbitrage throttle can be changed at any time by the Combinator DAO. A 24-hour delay is implemented between when a change is scheduled to when it is implemented. The Combinator DAO collects this ETH or Pulse, and there should be no expectations what the Combinator DAO does with it. So the arbitrage throttle, it's like was described there. It's done to help encourage both minting and buying, because without the buying, it's kind of when the whole point of this is to help the price of checks go with the to track the combined hex value. It doesn't do that without a market, and so to help encourage an active market, one simple solution is just to bake in a fixed small cost to it, which makes it so that users below some threshold are better off just buying, and users above that threshold can mint just fine. And it helps introduce a little bit of volatility to the eChex versus pChex chart, because for an arbitrage to make sense, that means that the value that the arbitrager is extracting needs to include that extra cost. So this is, not only to introduce a class of user who's going to be buying, but also it helps there introduce some volatility in there so that not only liquidity providers can make a little bit more money, but also people who are kind of swing trading those spreads. It makes sense for them as well. So um, that that is a pretty it's a key characteristic of the system that was really designed to help just foster an active market. Okay, so our approvals went through. Let's just click mint. Gas on PulseChain is 2 cents to mint right now, plus that throttle. So the throttle on PulseChain, you couldn't see that just because only this tab is showing, but 100,000 PLS tokens. So that's about $10. Is the cost for minting, but there's no cost for redemption. Um, so so yeah, so that's the minting process. It's a lot like minting any of our other HEX stake pool products, but in this case, you have to do two approvals because you're depositing two tokens, and then now, this CHEX is now backed by an equal amount of pHEX and eHEX. So this arbitrage throttle, I think, is a pretty awesome design characteristic that is set by a value in the contract called the Combinator DAO. And so right now, the Combinator DAO address that's listed in the contract. So here, let's just go to the contract on the block explorer so we can see what I'm talking about. So you can see what the Combinator DAO address is by just coming and clicking here. So let's look at the code and we can actually understand what's going on here. So that arbitrage throttle, that's a value that can be set only by the Combinator DAO address. So they can, it's completely at their discretion, whatever they set it as. But if you think about it, they're probably incentivized to make it really fair, because if too much is, if that throttle is too high, then there's going to be no activity, and then there's no proceeds generated there. And if it's too low, then also kind of no proceeds there. And also, if it's too low, then it reduces the amount of or it increases or it decreases the spread that can be created through that eHEX pHEX price, and it closes down that arbitrage window and reduces the the amount that people who are swing trading that can make. So that's the only value in here that the Combinator DAO can set, but it's a pretty important value because it's kind of like it's kind of the lifeblood of the whole system, is that there's both active minting, active arbitrage, and an active market. So the Combinator DAO address is who can set that value. But whenever they set it, what it does is it introduces a 24-hour delay for when that can be implemented. So they set it, and then after 24 hours, it can be put into effect using this execute arbitrage throttle change function, which anyone can run. The other function is that the collect arbitrage throttle. What all this does is all the PLS or ETH that is sent into the contract through the throttle is then just sent to the Combinator DAO address. And then the Combinator DAO address can transfer ownership of the Combinator DAO address to a new address. So this is done because right now Combinator DAO is really just the deployer, the deployer address of this contract. But the plan is to decentralize the Combinator DAO to make it where that value is set over, by a group of people. So the plan is, at some point here in the next couple weeks or months or whenever, is to airdrop a token that will be the Combinator DAO token, and the Combinator DAO token holders will vote to be able to execute these transactions. So, and the people that are going to be receiving that airdrop are going to be people who are providing liquidity in the CHEX ecosystem. So if you are providing liquidity on that eHEX pHEX pair, or there's going to be a handful of liquidity pools, you'll get an airdrop, and those users will be able to set these parameters and also collect the earnings from that arbitrage throttle. So that's really the importance of this arbitrage throttle, is that it's set to help kind of foster the right balance between minting and buying, and then rather than just being controlled by whomever deployed this contract, it'll be set by a group of people who have skin in the game in this ecosystem. So that's how it works, and this is the contract. I mean, if you look at this, it's a very short contract. So I guess we just now explained the arbitrage throttle sections, the functions, which are schedule arbitrage throttle change, execute arbitrage throttle change, collect arbitrage throttle, and change combinator DAO address. Let's look at the other functions. There's only two. So the function here is mint. So all it does is it makes sure that the transaction includes the arbitrage throttle amount. So on Ethereum, it is 0.0058 Ethereum. On PulseChain, it is 100,000 PLS. So it makes sure that the transaction includes that. It transfers from the user to the contract. So from the person sending it to the contract, the amount that the user passed in of HEX, and then it transfers in the amount of the bridged HEX from the user to the contract in that amount. And so it gets that address. It gets the address based on what chain it is by running this get address function, which it returns. So if block.chain ID, so if the chain that you're running on is chain ID number 1, then it returns hex from P address, so the hex from PulseChain. But if you're not on blockchain ID number 1, meaning you're on PulseChain, it returns the hex bridged from Ethereum address, which you can see up here. So these are the hex addresses, and then it just detects what network you're on, and then it knows what token to send. So it sends the hex from both the hex and the bridged hex from the user to the contract, and then it mints the user the amount of tokens, and then it emits an event here. So it's very simple. It's dead simple. And then here's the redeem function. So this one's even more simple. So first, it burns the amount of checks that the user put in here, and then it transfers from the contract to the user the amount that they requested, which is equal to the amount that they burnt, in both hex and the bridged hex. And then it emits this. Very simple, very to the point, very low gas consumption for participating in this. So literally, that's the contract. It's dead simple, very powerful, and this whole system can be replicated for other tokens. People have already been talking about how they're interested in this concept for Maxi, for any of the perpetual pools. So I'm very interested to see how this plays out, because there's really a lot here, a lot of potential. Can you explain the combinator DAO? Yeah, so I guess I kind of roughly explained it, but let's talk a little bit more about that. So the plan is to deploy a combinator DAO contract that will be able to run the functions that are marked with, like when you search let's just do this so we can see. So Combinator DAO. So if we search wherever the contract says Combinator DAO, okay, so I guess that didn't work that well, but okay. So like really what the address who can call the schedule arbitrage throttle change, so the address who can set this and the address who collects the throttle, that'll be a DAO. And so that DAO will have functions that are like, that are basically these functions that will call the HEX Combinator contract and be able to run the functions that are marked with this require message sender equals Combinator DAO address. So when that happens, the current Combinator DAO address will run this function, change Combinator DAO address, and it will call that function and transfer we'll update this Combinator DAO address to be the new DAO contract. And then that DAO contract will be the one that can execute these functions. So the full details will be finalized and announced whenever this is getting ready to roll out, kind of this next phase of HEX Combinator. But the DAO tokens will be airdropped to liquidity providers in this ecosystem. So if you are a liquidity provider, it'll be a handful of the different pools. So the full list of supported pools will be launched or announced at some point. But I mean, the ones I can think of that make sense right off the top of my head are going to be the eHEX pHEX pool that's on PulseChain, which there's one currently there now. The eHEX pHEX pool on Uniswap on Ethereum. Probably native hex to native CHEX on Ethereum, native hex to native CHEX on PulseChain, probably Ethereum to CHEX, Pulse to CHEX on PulseChain. What else makes sense? Maybe a DAI to CHEX on Ethereum, DAI to CHEX on PulseChain. So there's going to be a handful of supported, maybe CHEX Maxi, maybe CHEX Base. So full list of supported ones will be listed, but the DAO tokens will be airdropped to liquidity providers of CHEX, and then those DAO tokens will be used to vote on running these functions. So those users will be able to vote on what this throttle is. And those users will be able to vote on, or I guess they don't need to vote, but those users will distribute the proceeds from that arbitrage throttle. So that's how the DAO is going to work. Why not just farm the 2 for 56? Not sure what you mean. Can we make a CHEX pool? So last I looked, there was one on PulseChain. Congrats on this cool new product. Let's go. Thank you. Isn't CHEX a type of breakfast cereal? Yeah, it is. It's also CHEX Mix, which is like a snack type of thing. Cinnamon was pretty good if I remember right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Simply yet powerful. It's incredible. Yeah, this really is. I'm really happy with. I mean, one, I think it kind of interesting. So this idea, it's been swirling in my mind from the beginning. Right when the fork happened, I was like, okay, how are we going to track the value of eHEX and pHEX? And so that was kind of when the idea was really swirling around. And then on like Friday, I made, let's look at this. This is kind of what spurred action. hexcombine.anvil.app. I just made this chart to show the combined eHEX and pHEX price. So this pulls in the all-time HEX price on Ethereum and then the all-time HEX price on PulseChain and simply adds them together. And then it does some, calculates this all-time average and all-time median. So I made this just because I wanted to look at the chart and just to practice. Sometimes, like when I just want to just improve my programming skills, I'll just, if there's something like some number I'm thinking about that I want to know more about, or just something, I'll just make a quick little Anvil app to just practice. And because Goldkey's been learning Anvil, and I wanted to give him a clone link to an example of how to make charts on Anvil. So I just made this chart, and it just had me thinking, I'm like, okay, like this just pulls in the prices, but how can we launch a coin that is pegged to the combined value? I was like, okay, I just thought, well, like, okay, well, during the minting and redemption phases of the HEX stake pools that we've launched, the price was always pegged at 1, and then once the redemption window closed, then the price started going on its own. But during that minting and redemption, when you can mint and redeem at the same rate, then the price stays pegged to something, because if at any point the price goes above, then there's an arbitrage opportunity, or if any time the price goes below, there's an arbitrage opportunity. So that right here was kind of the like light bulb moment, like, oh, like if there's a token that was backed by an equal amount of eHEX and pHEX that was mintable and redeemable at all times, then the price should kind of hover around that combined eHEX pHEX price. And since the eHEX and pHEX are the same when they're bridged over to the opposite chain, then you could have a dual chain one where the eHEX or where the CHEX on Ethereum is equal in value to the CHEX on PulseChain, because not only can you do the minting and redeeming with the eHEX and pHEX on each of the chains, but you can do that bridge arbitrage. And so that was just kind of the concept, and so I was just like, okay, like how hard would that be to do? And so I just started writing the contract. So and it literally took about 10 minutes to write like the first version. And then I was like, okay, like then I started thinking through all, like, okay, like how would the arbitrage work? Like what, like, how can we make it so that there's both minters and buyers? And so that was kind of how that arbitrage throttle idea came. And that took a little bit of, maybe an hour or two to come up with and design. And then I started testing. So I tested it for over the course of, basically all day Sunday and Monday, just testing on. I have a local fork of Ethereum that I do testing on, and I was actually testing on PulseChain testnet. If you want to look at, if you want to sleuth around, you can probably find a contract. It wasn't called HEX Combinator, but you might find a contract on PulseChain mainnet that mints a token not called CHEX for that, for the deposit of HEX and bridge HEX. So I just did a lot of testing on Sunday and Monday, and then started building the front end, which was very simple. And so the reason why I was so motivated to do this is, one, this is part of some ideas we have for liquidity and indexing for pool tokens launched through Pool Party. And also I needed to just make some groundwork on the minting interface for Pool Party. And so when you're minting your pool tokens on Pool Party, the interface is probably going to look a lot like this. So I was kind of using this as a way to just make progress and push the ball forward on the Pool Party dashboard, because it's effectively the same concept where you deposit the HEX, call the function. So I was doing this as, partially because like efforts towards this indexing, I think, are going to be good for things that we want to introduce on Pool Party, And this helps kind of move the ball forward on the pool party user interface. And also, like I think that this is a really important utility for HEX, and I think that this can kind of bring new speculative stickiness into HEX, and kind of invigorate HEX a little bit. So there are a couple reasons why I wanted to make this, and because it was just so simple to do, it's like, why not? So very, very happy with how it it came out. Bro, yeah, fingers made of steel. Steel fingers. Actually, they're made of tungsten. My wedding ring is tungsten, so it's tungsten, and if you look closely, you can't even see, but the thing that gives it the glisten, it has these like little, they're not hexagonal. Some of them are hexagonal. It's kind of this like snakeskin grid pattern, machined into the tungsten, but some of them are actually, just because of the way they kind of overlap, some of them are hexagons. So tungsten hands. You make the community stronger. Thank you. Super glue. Thank you. Kemio asks, why do you think RH got rid of the eHEX pHEX farm? Let's go back here. So who knows? No clue. So I have no idea. I think probably he got rid of it when he realized that there was a problem with the liquidity pool. Remember when there was that bug on PulseChain that prevented the fees from being distributed? I think that was the first reason why. And so that was number one. I think with the other pools, it was a little bit different, the framing around that. So that was the first reason. Second reason is I have no idea. Like, totally, it's one of those things where it's just like, it's at his discretion. So it almost doesn't even matter why. It's like it's at whoever chose, it's their choice. And so it's because that's what they wanted. And maybe he was trying to see how things would respond to that. But yeah, who knows? Matt has just got here, but how do we get people to adopt this and understand the benefits in the most simple way? In the bull, nobody will care and ape anything, but now we need a very clear summary of why care. So kind of depends who you are. So if you are someone new into the system who's wanting to onboard into HEX, and you're interested in holding both eHEX and pHEX, now you have a token you can buy in a single swap that gives you an equal amount of eHEX and pHEX. So that's a big use case. So for people you onboard, you can just onboard right into this token, and it's a lot simpler than buying separately pHEX and eHEX. If you are someone that has both eHEX and pHEX and you plan on holding both of them liquid, then you can provide liquidity with your CHEX. And it, let me pull up this image 1 second here. And because there's this arbitrage opportunity when the values of either of them deviate, the price of CHEX versus on PulseChain versus CHEX on Ethereum is probably going to stand pretty constant. And so those are going to be ones that are good. Those are going to be good ones to provide liquidity for, because you have very low risk of impermanent loss. So this is a way to earn yield on your HEX without staking it, without staking the HEX. So that's a benefit there. So let's look. And then also, if you want to be arbitraging that spread or trading the deviation in that in the CHEX or in the CHEX on PulseChain versus CHEX on Ethereum market, then there's opportunity for you there. So that's the there just introduces a new opportunity and simplifies the user experience for onboarding. Is why. Why not just farm for 56% pHEX and eHEX on PulseChain? So yeah, I mean, that's also the, other thing you can do, like it's totally your choice. Um, so maybe it all depends on what the APY really ends up being over a long period of time. And, I think what can introduce some volume in this is the arbitrage spread, between CHEX and CHEX on PulseChain, CHEX on Ethereum. So we'll just have to see what what the APY is for the liquidity pool for this. So maybe it's just as competitive. We'll have to see how the liquidity pools in CHEX play out over the next couple weeks to see. Any plans on how it's going to interact on pHEX? Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking about it. Someone could make a index backed by CHEX bridged from Ethereum and CHEX native on PulseChain. And then what that could do is, and then by buying that one, you're now buying something that's backed by, I don't know really what the benefit of doing that would be. Maybe this can stand in as the best idea I've had so far is that we replicate this concept for Maxi, Base, Trio, Lucky, and Deci, and then we have these indexes that match the combined values, and then maybe there's like a combined value pool on pHEX. So I don't know. I'm still sorting out what might make sense, but yeah, that's what it is. All right, let's see if anyone else has any questions, and let's look at the numbers. Let's see how many have been minted. Okay, so 177,000 on Ethereum, 456,000 on PulseChain. So double these numbers, and that's the amount of HEX that's gone in. So it's over 1 million HEX has been put in so far. So pretty exciting. Benefit to CX over holding each asset liquid. Yeah, so arbitrage and liquidity providing. So that's like the main benefit. And if if you want to contribute to the onboarding experience of new users, you can mint CHEX and then supply it in a good onboarding liquidity pool. So that would be like versus ETH or Pulse, something that like a new user comes in with and they want to now deploy. And then you can earn the fees on that as well. So yeah, and also, I mean, holding CHEX, because the airdrop to the for that combinator DAO that I described will probably go to people that just mint as well. The majority will go to people that provide liquidity, but but they'll also probably be included in that as well. So there's that as well. All right, you guys. So if that's all the questions, I'm going to hop off. HEXcombinator.com. If you have any questions, hit me up on Twitter at Tantonomini or search Dipcatcher. I like it, almost like an index fund. Thanks again. Yep. And everyone go check out Ju Young's site, HSI Watch. Great site. Awesome guy. Smart developer. So, all right, you guys. I'm going to take off. I need some rest. Have a good one, everybody. Goodbye.